and welcome to today's Ask the Expert session, where we're going to be focusing on bottle feeding. And we're delighted to have Cathy Sage, infant feeding specialist, joining us to share her expertise with us today. Cathy, it's wonderful to have you here with Mummy Star. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in supporting families while they're feeding their little ones, please?
Sure, yes. It's such a joyful thing to be able to do. So, yeah, I'm Cathy. I'm a lactation consultant and a bottle feeding expert as well. We don't have any special qualifications in bottle feeding. So I've just done all the training that I could possibly do, including with a lovely lady called Rachel O'Brien in the US. And for the last 20 years, I've been supporting parents with all their sort of bottle feeding challenges. So I've seen thousands and thousands of babies. So today, I hope that we can talk about some of the huge joys of bottle feeding and some of the common questions and even some of the challenges and concerns, so that we make sure everyone's feeling really confident in how to bottle feed their baby. So I thought what we'd talk about today is the benefits of bottle feeding, how we're going to choose bottles, because when you go to the supermarket or to Boots or whatever, there's just so much choice. And also looking at the formula milks. So how do we select a milk that's suitable for your baby and the age of your baby? Preparing the bottles. So what do we actually need? There is loads and loads of stuff on the market, but what do we actually need to get these bottles washed and sterilized and ready? And how to bottle feed. So we'll look at positions, how you know your baby's okay with bottle feeding. We're going to figure out some of the questions around how much to put in the bottle, how much to offer, and then some of the common issues that people deal with, like bottle refusal, bottle aversion. And if we've got time and people are interested, we can talk about older babies, how we get older babies to accept bottles as well. Okay. So first of all, then, the benefits of bottle feeding. It can be absolutely lovely. I mean, bottle feeding is a huge joy. It's wonderful for the babies, and family and friends, we find, just really enjoy that bonding, happy time with the little one. I meet so many partners who are just like, this is my favorite time to be snuggling with the babies. One of the nice things about bottle feeding is that you do have some predictability, maybe, around things like timing and volume. So sometimes it's a way to get babies into a bit more of a pattern. We'll be talking about responsive feeding, and we do still need to do this in a way that is responsive to your babies. Bottle feed's an awesome way for you to get some rest. And we just need to be clear that formula is absolutely great stuff. So millions of pounds every year go into researching formula and to making sure that infant formula is nutritionally complete, that it's a food that your babies are going to absolutely thrive on. I guess we should talk about how to choose a bottle. And there are just so many on the market, and then there's very little actual practical information about, or independent information anyway, on, what you're going to choose. So if you go into the shops, you're going to see all sorts of different things. We've got skinny teats, which can be made of latex or silicone. We've got cone-shaped teats. We've got lozenge-shaped teats. We've got bottles with all sorts of funky bits of kit inside them that may or may not help to reduce colic and reflux and wind. We've got wide ones that are meant to mimic the shape of a boob. And we've got orthodontic ones. And then we've got even ones that are meant to look like a breast. So how on earth are you meant to choose? So I just wanted to reassure that most babies take most bottles just fine. So if you're going to pick one that's suitable for the age of your baby, which means that if you've got a newborn, you're going to pick a slow flow bottle that's suitable for the age of your baby. If you have a much older child, you might be looking at a faster flow. So we can pick one that's the right range for your baby. And then you might choose features that you think will be nice for you. But I have to say that almost every bottle manufacturer is going to put somewhere on their packaging closer to breastfeeding, closer to nature, guaranteed or clinically proven, this makes me laugh, clinically proven to reduce colic, wind, spit up, reflux and things like that. And I'm afraid we just don't have the independent research on that. It's just what the manufacturers like to say, but we can't be sure about any of it. What we do know is that most babies take most bottles just fine. So let's have a look at these different teat shapes, for example. So the skinny teats, particularly useful for preemie babies, for very tiny babies. So a lot of hospital teats are narrow like this. Trouble with skinny teats is that it can be quite hard to fill the bottles with your formula. It's easier to spill it, the powder, you can spill it. So a lot of people prefer a kind of a wider neck just because it's easier to fill the bottle in that way. That is kind of up to you, but tiny, tiny babies often do quite well on a skinny teat. The latex teats, latex feels a bit more like skin. So some babies prefer latex. Most teats on the market are made of silicone. That is really up to you. Occasionally we've got people who are allergic to latex. So do just check if that's something that's a problem in your family. The different shapes, just to get a sense of it, you can see that there's such a difference between a kind of conical shaped teat and a teat that goes short, kind of stubby and then wide really quickly. So you could be looking at these things thinking, well, I don't know how to choose. As we said, it generally doesn't make a difference, but we do need to make sure that the teat fits your baby well. So if you try just get one and see, what we would suggest you do actually is to have the baby on your lap facing you and to offer them the teat just in the ring like this. So if you go in towards the baby's palate, let the baby start sucking on the teat, you can look down the middle and make sure that your baby's got a good grip on it. So if your baby's sealing well on the teat, it's going to be, they'll have sealed all the way around it, and you'll start to hear this little noise that kind of goes. And that's when you know that your baby's got a good seal on it and you'll actually almost feel it suck in. So if your baby can do that and you can see their little tongue working underneath and they've got a good seal and you're hearing that they're not swallowing air or anything, you know that's going to be a good teat for your baby. So that's kind of the first test I would do is, does it fit? Does it seem to be working for them? And if yes, it's a good choice, really. Other things you might choose, like some of the features of the bottles might appeal to you. For example, some bottles come in a way that you can sterilize them in a microwave without needing to buy a separate sterilizer. This one's got a kind of a flattened teat. I find that works quite well with babies that keep their tongues low and flat. I suppose that's why I can't say there's just one bottle that suits all babies, because it's a bit like fitting shoes. Some work better than others for different babies. So you just got to kind of see what is right for your little one. Some of the anti-wind, anti-colic features, these are things that make the bottles a little bit more expensive and a little bit harder to clean. We don't know for sure that they make any difference for colic and wind and spit up and reflux, just because pretty much all babies do spit up. They do have moments when they're going to posset some milk. They do have nights when they're really uncomfortable, and we can't really say for sure that the bottle selection is making any difference. You might be choosing between glass bottles and silicone or plastic bottles. So all the bottles on the market are considered suitable for your babies. And I have a feeling that we're going to start leaning more towards glass bottles and silicone bottles because of concern about microplastics in the milk. And if we heat up plastics a lot, you've probably been reading in the press, there can be more microplastics in it. We don't have any evidence that they cause problems for your baby, but I've just got a sense that we may be moving more towards glass bottles. The annoying thing about them, though, is that they're heavy. Silicone bottles are just quite new on the market, so we don't have a lot. I don't have a lot of those to show you right now. So there's kind of all sorts of different things that you might buy. Some of the bottles, you can get quite complicated. You can choose them to match, skin color and these kind of things. We don't have evidence that babies need a funky bottle. Generally, a supermarket bottle is just fine. It really is. I need to say up front, I'm not sponsored by any particular manufacturer or anything like that. So, I'm not going to try and sell you one thing over another. What I would say is, in terms of teat shapes and this sort of thing, if I was to reach for a bottle just now, I would probably start with one that has a gradual slope from here. Because most babies will get a nice seal on a bottle somewhere where we've got a nice gradual slope. We don't have evidence that babies need orthodontic bottles or anything like that. We'll know that it's the right bottle for your baby if it fits them well. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute and what we'd be looking for while your baby's bottle feeding. And then we have the other minefield, which is how to choose a formula. I'm sure you'll realize if you go into Boots. Again, there's just so many different things. We've got powdered formula, we've got ready to feed formula, and then we've got all sorts of different brands that you could look at. And we also have things like comfort formula and anti-colic formula and lactose-free formula and all these different things. And I can see how it's incredibly difficult for new parents to make a decision about that. So the main thing to know is that all the formula in the UK is suitable for your babies. It's very, very heavily regulated. And the only thing you need to look for is a number 1. So somewhere on the packaging, you need a number 1 because that means it's suitable from newborn. And in fact, you never need to switch. So formulas 2 and 3, you don't need them. even after 6 months or a year, you don't need a specialist formula. Just buy one with a number one, and that is totally fine for your little one. Formula 2 is called follow-on formula. That was really just made because they're allowed to market it and put it on the side of buses and stuff like that. So we don't need follow-on formula. And actually, after a year old, your babies don't need formula at all. They can have full-fat cow's milk or some of the fortified alternatives. And to find out about that, have a little look at First Steps Nutrition. First Steps Nutrition is a brilliant source of information about all this stuff. So in terms of brands, pick any. We don't have any evidence that the most expensive ones on the market are any different from Lidl, really. You can get any brand, it doesn't matter. And you can switch between. It's a bit like dog and cat food. They always say, oh, no, once you've picked one, you can't change. That is rubbish. Of course, you can change it. It's, pick one and see how your baby gets on with it, really. The standard ingredients are all completely the same. It honestly doesn't matter. You might find that you want to pick one just ethically because, say, Candamil's made in the UK. It doesn't travel quite so far as other formulas. And the Instagram's full of happy cows and cute babies and wellies. It doesn't have palm oil or fish oil in it. So if that feels like something that feels important to you ethically, you can choose that. But it doesn't make any difference for the little one. Organic milk is almost certainly lovely for the cows. It's much nicer for the cows. But again, it doesn't make any difference for your baby as far as we know. Not all formulas are halal. So you might just want to check, even within the same brand, because they're made in different factories. We'll get some that are and some that aren't halal. No real formulas for vegetarians or vegans at the moment. We just don't really have those options. We need the oils, particularly, and the rennet and these sorts of things to help to make baby formula at the moment. So I can't say that there's one that's particularly suitable for veggies or vegans. And please don't home make formula. It's just never okay. So we don't do that. The anti-colic milk. As you go in, you think, oh, wouldn't it be lovely if I can just make my baby more comfy by buying a comfort milk or something like that? We don't have evidence that babies need those. It's thickened formula, so it stays down a little bit more. But generally speaking, we just don't need to buy anything like that. And we really don't need milks that are labelled lactose-free or hydrolyzed. Babies don't need lactose-free formula unless they are very, very sick because they are properly having problems with lactose, and that's so unusual. So you would know if your baby was allergic to lactose, they'd be in hospital. Please don't buy lactose-free formula just because you think that might be a good idea. I'm so pro formula, but I'm a bit annoyed that lactose-free formula is on the supermarket shelves because it's just not the right thing to buy for your babies. Hydrolyzed formula, that's specialist formula for babies that are allergic to cow's milk or goat's milk. Very similar proteins in both. Generally, you don't need that either. Got about 1% of babies are allergic to cow's milk or goat's milk. But lots of parents worry about it. And if their babies are feeling a bit gassy, they might think, oh, maybe it's cow's milk. It generally isn't. So if you're really worried that your baby's allergic to cow's milk, please go and see your GP about it. But if they were actually allergic to the formula, they would have symptoms like hives, puffiness, blood in their poo, mucus in their poo, covered in eczema. There'd be a whole load of signs that would show your baby was allergic to the formula. It's so unusual. Please you don't need to go there just in case. Cow's or goat's milk doesn't make any difference. The proteins in them are very similar. Most formulas in the UK are made from cow's milk. As we said, you can switch brands. And as I said, look at First Steps Nutrition as a great place to get independent research on all this stuff. In terms of getting our bottles ready, the key thing is we need to wash them up very well. But when you're washing our bottles, you're going to need a bottle brush and hot soapy water. And we've got to take the teats and the rings apart. Okay, so we need to be able to get any washing up liquid in here, and then around the threads here. So it's going to be covered in bubbles now, so you're going to need to rinse it. And that is your key step, is to wash it up well in hot soapy water. They can go in the dishwasher. Again, we've got to take the teats and the rings apart, and the teats are going to fly around the dishwasher unless you wash them separately, or you wedge them into your cutlery compartment, with the lid on. So that's possible too. None of these things, however, sterilize the bottle. And in the UK, we are told to sterilize our bottles until the babies are a year. You might have different views on this. So I have to tell you what the NHS says, which is to sterilize until they're a year. We all know that by about 6 months, your babies are going to be crawling on the floor and eating absolute nonsense off the floor. And I think it was when my eldest was licking the meat counter at Sainsbury's, out of the pushchair. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to sterilize your bottles anymore. But that is entirely up to you. And certainly with our tiny or preemie or vulnerable babies, we're going to be all over the sterilizing. So when you've washed up really well, the sterilizing process, if you have nothing else, just put your stuff in boiling water. Boil it in a saucepan of water. It takes about 8 minutes to sterilize your stuff. Make sure it's under the water. Other forms of sterilizing, we've got Milton's sterilizing solution. You get like a bucket, you put all your stuff in it. When the stuff comes out of the Milton, we do have to rinse it. We've got to rinse it under the tap, which doesn't mean it's dirty again. It's like it's already sterile and you run it under tap water and that's absolutely fine. Steam sterilizing is what many people reach for because it's kind of cheap. It works very well. This is a microwave steam sterilizer. You put all your kit inside. It tells you how much water it needs. This one needs 200 mils. And then you in the microwave or you plug it in, it's going to be full of steam, so it's sterile. Sterilizing bags go in the microwave as well. That's another thing where you can do a small number of bottles in the microwave if you're on the go. And then we have UV sterilizers now on the market. UV sterilizers, we just don't quite have the evidence for at the moment. So they work by putting UV light onto the bottles. We know that they're not going to sterilize a dirty bottle. Okay, so I mean, obviously we've got to wash up really, really well before the stuff goes in. And we need to be particularly careful to do that. If you've got a UV sterilizer, it takes a little bit longer. They cost a little bit more money. But you do get beautifully clean and the sterile bottles at the end of it. So that's kind of personal choice, really, which ones you use. Since we've had UV sterilizers, everyone's thinking my bottles have got to be dry once they're sterile. And that isn't actually the case. I do wonder whether we've had a lot of influencing going on to try and push us towards UV sterilizing. If your bottles have come out of sterilizing like this one, which has just been used, they're going to have some steam in them, and that is absolutely fine. Just leave them in there until you're ready to go. Steam it's just sterile water, right? So a lot of formula is water anyway. We don't have to worry about a bit of sterile water in our bottle before we fill it. What we don't want to do is grab a dirty old tea towel, dry our bottle, and now we've made our bottle dirty again. If you see what I mean, just leave it there. Obviously, once you've opened your sterilizer, the stuff in there isn't sterile anymore, and I don't want you to panic because actually that is fine. Don't sneeze in it. Please wash your hands after you've done the dog or something or been to the loo. But we're not doing any surgery, so the stuff doesn't have to be super, super sterile before you feed your baby. So we've got our washed and sterilized bottles ready. Now we've got to put some stuff in them. And again, we've got all sorts of different ways of doing that. So it depends whether we've selected formula powder or ready-to-feed formula. So if we've got ready-to-feed formula, it is exactly what it says. You're just going to store it on a shelf at home. And if you're going to use this, you've got different options. You can just open it up and put a sterile teat on top of it. So if you're formula feeding your babies right from the start, you're going to see that there's little tiny versions of this you can buy with sterile teats. So that's all you need to do. Just put the top on it, feed the baby. Once your baby's started this, you've got about an hour with it, and then you have to throw it away. If you think, and I'm just going to feed the baby a little bit, you might open this up, pour what you need into your sterile bottle, use the bottle. Anything you haven't used here is good for 24 hours if you put it in the back of the fridge. So anything the baby hasn't touched is good for 24 hours if you're using the ready to feed. Ready to feed is super convenient, as you can imagine. And we know that it's the right concentration in here. If you want to warm up a ready-to-feed bottle before you use it, you're just going to stand it in some warm water. Stand it in a bowl of warm water. We don't pour it out and microwave it. We don't warm it up like babies in a saucepan. We're just going to warm it in some warm water. Try it on your wrist if it feels not hot, not cold, the suitable temperature for your baby.
Can I ask a quick question? When you said, you could use a portion of that bottle and then put the lid back on, put it in the fridge, does it need to go in the fridge, not the door of the fridge?
Ideally, yes, because once we open the fridge, the door warms up a little bit more. Putting it back in the fridge is a bit more consistent temperature-wise. Yeah, so there's that. The ready-to-feed, as you can imagine, is super easy to prepare. If we're preparing powder, all the instructions are on the side. So do have a really close read of what's on the side, because we've got to do this correctly to make sure that it's done safely. What we do there is we wash and sterilize our bottles. We wipe down our surfaces. We wash our hands. We're all ready to go. We boil a fresh kettle of water. Right, so it's just ordinary tap water, absolutely fine. Nice fresh kettle rather than one that's been boiled several times, like in my house, to make sure the concentration of salts and everything are in it. What we're doing is we're putting the boiling water into the bottles, and whilst it's still over 70 degrees, we have to make the formula. And we're making the formula in water over 70 degrees because this isn't sterile. So it's not to do with the water, it's to do with the powder. Once we've opened this, it's not a sterile product. So we have to put it into water that can leave it over 70 degrees for a few minutes in order to kill any bacteria that are in here. And the suggestion is that once we do that, we cool it down again and then we feed our baby. So the formula manufacturers are saying, you've got to do this one at a time. And as you can imagine, that means thinking about half an hour before your baby's due to be hungry. Okay, I've got to go make a bottle. So it's a pain. It is a pain to do it that way. Because it's a pain, people do use workarounds. The sort of workarounds you could do, you can make more than one bottle if you want to. And the NHS says if you do that, put the bottles you're not using into the fridge, back in the fridge, put your power cool on, and definitely use them within 24 hours. Because if you think if there's any tiny bacteria left in there, they're going to be growing over time. So if you have to, make a few bottles at a time, put them in the fridge, but definitely use them in 24 hours. Alternatively, a lot of parents reach for the perfect prep machine or the other machines on the market. So there's a picture of one here. Do look at what they're doing. Some of them don't use hot water, and I'm afraid the NHS is not going to recommend them because it's not sterilizing the product. The perfect prep machine and others in that line, they put a shot of steam through the powder. So it's like a two-step process. You put your powder into the bottle, you steam it, and then it adds cold filtered water to the formula. So you get a formula bottle within 2 minutes. That can be absolutely awesome. Lots of parents absolutely love these machines. They'll say they're the best thing they've ever bought. We have to be honest. They've been on the market for over 10 years and generally speaking, they're absolutely fine. We've got to keep them clean. We've got to know that they're only going to get rid of about 95% of the bacteria because they're not hot enough for long enough to completely make that powder sterile. For most people, that is absolutely fine. And I just have to explain the risks and benefits of these machines. It's not going to be a completely sterile product. You might like to get a little thermometer and actually find out, is your machine making the milk over 70 degrees? Is that working for you? And you might also think, if the baby's particularly vulnerable for some reason, it's very early or has something else going on health-wise, you might be more cautious with making formula. You might be more inclined to reach for something like this or to make the formula according to the manufacturer's instructions. So I just kind of need to explain that a little bit.
Cathy, when you if you do make the formula up with hot water from the kettle and then baby's really hungry, is it okay to cool it down quickly by running it under a cold tap?
Yeah, absolutely. You could totally put it into ice or run under the cold tap because it's nothing more stressful, is it? Than the baby screaming, you're like, formula's not the right temperature. So yes, of course you can do that for sure. And there are some machines on the market that can cool the bottles now as well. So you've got the option to have a bottle cooler, but running under the cold tap kind of does the job. In terms of getting out the bubbles, the products that take the bubbles out, basically I would be swirling my bottle rather than giving it a really vigorous shake if I could. If you've left it for a few minutes, the bubbles come out.
Another question. I'm just asking every question that I had.
Yes.
So I want to go out. What do I do?
Yes, exactly.
If you want to go out, no.
Feels like that. If you want to go out, get your nice sterile bottle and put its lid on, and either take one of these or take one of these with a sterile teat that goes with. I mean, if you've got the money, I know they're about £1 each, so it's an expensive thing to do. Alternatively, if you've got some formula in the fridge that you've made, take it out like in a picnic, like you were going for a picnic on a hot day, take it out in a cool pack and as quickly as possible. The NHS would say take a flask, like a flask that you only use for hot water, so that you take it out with boiling water in it, and then you take your formula powder in a little plastic container and make it on the go.
Does that flask need to be sterilised?
Well, you're going to put boiling water in it. So
okay, so that's okay.
Once your baby's started the bottle, really, it's about an hour before you need to chuck it, which is annoying, but that's just the way it is. Once you've got baby bacteria going from their mouth, going into the formula, we're just not sure that it's good for much longer than an hour. Anything else on that quickly?
When a baby starts a bottle, but then, stops, and you think, actually, they're probably going to want this in another 10 minutes. Are you okay to give them that bottle? Do we need to make sure the lid that comes with the bottle has gone on? Does it matter if it doesn't go on?
I wouldn't worry too much about the lid, depending unless you're doing something really dirty.
Yeah. Well, if, baby needs to burn the cups or something, you stop for 20 minutes, half an hour, the baby could have that same bottle again.
You can rewarm it if you want to.
I was always under the impression that you shouldn't add formula powder to boiling hot water, that it needs to cool a little.
Yeah, it would say cool it, so it's above 70 degrees. So if you have a lot of water, if you boil a whole kettle of water, it could be sometime in that next half an hour that it's about 70 degrees. It's tricky to give an exact figure because if you've only filled up your bottle a little bit, it's going to cool much quicker. So just to be aware that it's meant to go in water that's over 70 degrees, but if it's still absolutely boiling, it can make it a bit clumpy. I would always say refer to the manufacturer's instructions really for this sort of thing. Okay. Should we talk about how to actually bottle feed then? So first things first is keeping your baby comfy. So you've got your bottle already. And to keep the baby comfy, we're going to make sure that their head and their neck is in a line. So they're not having to kind of turn their head a lot to bottle feed. They're going to be most comfy with their arms in front of them, their whole body supported, and ideally, if possible, with their feet supported or their feet on something. I'm just suggesting this because particularly with older babies, sometimes you want to bottle feed them and then trying to do a sit-up. And you probably know yourself if you're trying to do a sit-up, your core is really tense and it's much harder to feed. So you want the babies to feel like completely supported and comfortable. You're generally good if the baby's head is higher than their bum. That's usually quite a useful thing to do. Now, I know in hospitals, we see the babies being fed like this by the midwives, kind of out here, being gripped behind the back of their neck. In fact, in that position, the babies aren't supported back here. And although it looks incredibly professional, it's not always the closest, snuggliest, nicest way to feed your babies. So probably you'd want to pull them, wouldn't you? And keep them really nice and close and lots of cuddles and lots of eye contact and make it a snuggly and a lovely, loving experience. If you want to bottle feed your baby skin to skin, that is so beautiful. And it's such a lovely thing to do, especially when they're tiny. So we can make these bottle feeds just as snuggly as anything. So this is quite a nice position. We've got the baby in a nice straight line. Their head's in line with their body. Their arms are in front of them. There's space here. They're not going to feed like this. So that works very well. Another one that I really love is elevated side lying. And I've got a picture of it. And I'll try and show you what I mean. Elevated side lying is where we've got the babies like this. So their head's higher than their bum. Bum's against you, little feet are here. And it makes it more like a breastfeeding position. And we use this for all the ages of babies, but particularly for our tiny tinies, because the milk doesn't go straight down the back of their throat like this. It goes into their cheek, which makes it slightly easier for them to pace. So this is elevated side lying. If this is nice straight on knees, that's wonderful. Not everybody likes to do this, and some partners in particular find it a bit challenging. So you might like to have the babies on a cushion like this, and you can see that we can kind of support them behind their head here, head higher than their bum, and the bottle goes in. Like that. Okay, so different positions available. This one can feel really natural. It's not quite snuggly though. You're going to find one that suits you and your baby really well. The nice thing about this is that if mommy needs to lie down, for example, we can have the kind of baby alongside like this and bottle feed the baby this way. So you've got a lot of flexibility when we have an elevated side lying position. Okay, so let's think how we start these feeds. So what we're going to be doing is grabbing our bottle. We want to invite the baby to have the bottle. All right, so what you might like to do is just rub that teat on the baby's top lip, see if the baby wants to feed. If the baby does want to feed, they're going to go, right, actually start with the bottle. And what I suggest is we start the feed by going in slightly upwards towards the palate. So don't give the baby any milk yet. Let them get their tongue underneath it. Let them get a nice feel on the side. Once they've got that and you start hearing that noise, that's when we start giving them some milk. And we just give them some milk, let them glug it. And you can always pace them by just bringing that bottle down. You don't even need to take it out of their mouth. Let them have a bit more. What we're trying to do here is to keep the level of the milk pretty much level with their top lip. So it's not pouring in super fast. We don't really want that, which would be a bit too fast. We want them to get a chance to kind of pace it and to have pause if they want to. So that works well. And the same deal on the side. So we let them suck on the bottle. Once they've got a good grip on it, we let them drink it. And then we can pause. You'll know your baby wants to pause. They might just pause anyway, and you don't have to take the bottle out, and that's awesome. Or they might kind of go, pause, break. Oh. In which case, we just take that bottle down or take it out and let them have a moment. So I was just going to show you what a good latch looks like on a bottle. Some good latch on a bottle. The baby's got their top and bottom lip rolled out around the bottle. You can see in this picture the baby's, the levels of milk. Either the baby's swallowing milk, not milk, air, milk, air, milk, air. It's not like right up here, so it's not sort of flying into their mouth. So I'm looking for a latch where we've got the top and bottom lip rolled out, and the baby's looking relaxed, right? The baby's got really relaxed forehead, their arms and their hands are relaxed, their body's relaxed, they're not sort of coughing or choking or pulling back. So that's a really good latch on a bottle. Not such good latches on the bottle here. We've got this first baby has and they're rolled in. That's not a great latch on the bottle. So you can see the baby's trying to feed a bit like this with their lips in. That is slightly more common when we've got a bottle that starts stubby and then goes wide really quickly. Sometimes the babies just don't get a great latch on that bottle. They're not rolling their lips out. And you can see the baby on the side is dribbling milk out of the sides. So that's not a great latch. We don't have a good seal and the baby's actually spilling milk from the sides there. The signs your babies need a break, again, if they're kind of frowning, if they're giving you the finger, if they're laying they need a break. If they're actually pulling away from the bottle, they need a break. And if they're pushing tons of milk out of the side, again, they might be a bit overwhelmed by the flow rate. So we need to stop that. If your baby's continually coughing, choking, sputtering, looking uncomfortable, dribbling milk, we need to change out that bottle. That's not the right bottle or flow rate for your little one, really. Winding, this is another thing that a lot of people have got opinions about, and there's there's very little actual evidence around it. So if your baby looks uncomfortable, it goes very squirmy, very rigid, just like I can't feed air, this is where we might offer the chance to wind. I don't know if you all have favourite winding positions, but you'll see different things. Sometimes just bringing the babies upright helps. If you want to be funky about it, right cheek to right cheek. Slightly wonky is the flavour of month on Instagram, wonky winding. And we're just giving the baby a gentle pat or a rub. We are not whacking them. Okay, we don't hit the babies. That just gives them more wind and upsets them. So just gentle rub or a tap. Other ways to win them, you've probably seen this kind of thing, right? Where we've got the baby supported and we're giving them a bit of a rub. But again, it's that straight back that makes all the difference. Not all bent over, doesn't tend to work. And for farts, lots of different ways we can get rid of farts. This is one of my favourites. You see that? So we're actually getting into the baby's intestine, not just bicycling their legs, but we can kind of dance around a bit with the babies like this as well. It's quite a fun thing to do. Different ways to get wind out. Some babies need more wind in than others, I've got to be honest. If the babies are uncomfortable, wind them. But if they are just like, I'm totally blissed out, I'm absolutely fine, arms all relaxed, you don't need to wind them. I don't piss them off and wake them up and bash them around because it's going to make them cry. They will wind when they need to, especially if they're just kind of here. Right? So if they're here, they just wind spontaneously. If you wear them or keep them in a sling that's nice and safe, they will burp spontaneously. So don't want anyone to worry too much about winding.
Gosh, I wish I'd have spoken to you before I had my two. I just think the hours I spent winding babies that didn't need to be winded.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember being told that if baby's just fed and maybe they've fallen asleep, you couldn't lay them down and needed to hold them upright. Or what do you do in that situation if they've fallen asleep and you're wanting to put them in the car, the most put them down?
It's such a tricky thing, isn't it? So we don't have evidence. If I'm completely honest, we just don't have evidence. We've got a lot of opinion. We don't know. We do know, if I'm honest, that babies don't want to lie on their backs, especially not babies. They just don't. They want to be here.
Yeah.
This is their natural habitat. And if you're able to keep them pretty much here, they're really happy. And then we try and put them down and they're not happy. And we don't really know why, but it could be many, many reasons, including they just don't want to be on their own, on their back. They can't do anything. They can't hear you. They can't smell you. They're not regulated. They get cold. They just want to be here. So if you do have any other handy adult around, you can just snuggle them. Amazing. And of course, we weren't meant to do this on our own or, in tiny families. We were meant to do this in communities where we've just any number of relatives or friends who would hold the baby for you. But now we don't have that as much. And we're all encouraged to put the babies down. So I suppose some of it is just leaning into the fact that, they might want to be here and that might help them digest, stand to reason. We do worry as parents that baby's on their back because we think, oh my gosh, what if I haven't winded my baby and then my baby's sick? So that's the primary fear of parents. It's like, what if my baby's sick? And I just have to say that most happy, healthy newborns and older babies will turn their heads if they need to spit up. But they just do. We worry about this, I think, because of adults, because what we know about drunk adults or unconscious adults on their back, that wouldn't be safe. Right? So if you were unconscious on your back, there's a chance that you could vomit and that would be awful. But brand new babies only drink milk and they're meant to just go black. So every baby in the country's got a little black next to them somewhere, and that's okay. So generally speaking, cuddle them if you can, but if you have to put them down, try not to worry too much. You're going to have lots of questions around how much to put in these bottles, and it's so confusing, and every source is different. So in the end, we always kind of try to be responsive to the baby. So we read the baby, not the book, as far as we possibly can. In the early weeks, your baby's going to want to feed at least 8 times a day, probably somewhere between 8 and 12 times in 24 hours. And I suppose if you thought to yourself, right, if I was to divide up 8 feeds into 24 hours, that would be every 3 hours. Or if it was 12 feeds, it would be every 2 hours. And then we get this idea that we need to feed our babies bang on every 3 hours, for example. And we might be told in hospital that we need to do that. There's a reason why they might suggest that for a brand new baby. We do know that if you're feeding your babies pretty much every 3 hours, you're not going to bounce back into hospital with a dehydrated baby. So you can see how if they give people that sense that it's going to be every 3 hours, everything's going to be okay. And it's quite a useful thing to keep in mind. It's just that babies didn't read that. So babies, even tiny ones, might want to feed and then feed half an hour later. Or they feed and 10 minutes later they find they've got space for pudding, like we do. Or they feed and they want a 4 hours sleep. And then they want a half an hour sleep. And then they want an hour and a half. And you're just like, But actually that's really normal. So if we're responding to our baby's hunger, we're generally going to be okay. So this is full-term, happy, healthy babies. We generally don't need to put them on a really fixed schedule unless you want to. If we have a preemie baby, of course, we're all over it. If we have a baby that's jaundiced or tiny or vulnerable in some way, we put them on a feeding schedule. We make sure that they're going to be okay. But for robust, happy, healthy ones, usually we can be led by the baby, which means that we respond to their feeding cues. And you know your baby's hungry if, for a start, they're waking up. And then they might start doing this, which is weird. It's like they're dreaming of milk and they haven't even opened their eyes yet. And then they'll start going, they're trying to put their hands in, but they can't really find their hands. So you get a lot of this going on, and then they go a bit red, and then they're really awake. And then they start going for anyone right there, which we call rooting. They'll be going for dad, they'll be going for anybody. These are all signs of hunger. So if you're seeing that, please offer your baby their bottle. You don't feel you've got to hold out for exactly 3 hours or something. If they're showing you signs of hunger, please feed them. Because babies want to suck for lots of reasons, not just hunger. Sometimes they want to suck to go to sleep. Sometimes they want to suck because they've got tummy aches, sometimes whatever. There might be times when your babies are packed full of milk, but they still want to suck on something. So if you feel like your baby's actually had masses, but they're just like, please let me suck something to go to sleep, that is when you might offer a clean finger with the pad side up, or you might offer a dummy even, if you know your baby's full and they just need to suck something to go to sleep. If 5 minutes later they're howling because really they wanted feeding, then to feed them. You won't get away with that if they're actually hungry. So so we're going to be responsive. We're going to be reading the baby. We're going to be making sure the babies look happy. We know you've got a happy baby if they finish their feed and they look all relaxed and they go to sleep and then they wake up hungry in a reasonable amount of time. We know they're happy if they're at the end of their first week, they're doing 6 wet nappies a day and some poos, and they look well, and they're, their skin fit, and just we're kind of looking at the big picture, I guess, how the babies are. For your first ever bottle feeds, you might start your first bottle feeds in hospital with about 10 mil. Start with about 10 mil, so it's tiny. So even the hospital bottles, they're 70 mil bottles. They're far too much for a brand new newborn. So it would be thinking more like 10 mil for your first feed. You wouldn't go wrong then thinking 20 mils on the second day, 30 mils on the third day, 40 mils on the fourth day, 50 on the fifth day, 60 on the sixth day. But obviously, again, we're led by the baby. So this is just a very, very rough guide. After the end of the first week, if we're looking at a fully bottle-fed baby, we're looking at about 150 to 200 mils per kilo of baby. So say you had a 3-kilo baby, that would be 3 multiplied by 150 mils in 24 hours. So it'd be 450 mils in 24 hours or more, up to 600 mils in 24 hours. You wouldn't go wrong thinking of that as a rough guide, again, being led by a baby. From 1 month to 6 months, oh my gosh, there's such a variation. The formula manufacturers make us think that the volumes are going to keep going up and the frequency of feeds will go down. So they're suggesting like these massive bottles 5 times a day or something. A lot of babies don't love that. They're going to, their body's kind of stretching too much. So you might find that your babies want smaller but more frequent feeds than the manufacturers suggest. We don't know. We honestly don't know. It might be 600 mils some days and a litre another day. And our job as parents, really, if our babies are well and healthy, is to offer and to see what they take. And we don't force them to finish feeds, and we don't hassle them to take a certain number of mils every day. If the baby's happy and healthy, we kind of get led by them. It's a very famous doctor that suggested that all our feeding bottles really ought to be made out of aluminium so that we don't know how much is in them. And we'd be much more prepared to be baby-led. When your baby's finished their bottle and they come off and they're looking fine, we don't want to keep hassling them because somewhere you read that they need to take them.
We've got to question, are newborn bottles required, or are they marketing to get you to buy more bottles? Can I just buy one set of bigger bottles?
Yes, but the flow rate has to be right. So the companies tend to sell small bottles with a slow flow teat, and then they sell bigger bottles with a faster flow teat for slightly older babies. So if you started with the big ones, you might find that the teats are too fast and you'd need to switch out. So you might need to find that you buy a slow flow teat that fits on the same bottle. It would be lovely if all the brands were interchangeable, but of course they're not. They don't want you to switch around. So mostly you have to buy the same teat and bottle that go together. So I hear you. It'd be much nicer just to buy big bottles. The other thing to bear in mind is that lots of these bottles actually, although they're small, like this one goes up to 160 mil, and some babies are never going to want bigger feeds than this. So just as long as the flow rate is right for your baby, to get a sense of the flow rate, about 30 mils in 5 minutes would be about right. So when your baby's drinking, you just want to see that they're comfortable. You want to see that their jaw is kind of going down about once per second, that they're able to pace themselves, that they're not dribbling or coughing or choking. And if your baby's looking comfy and doing fine with that bottle, maybe you don't even need to change the teats as you go. It's all about reading your baby again and making sure the baby's comfy. I'm quite aware that we're going to have some babies that are needing to switch onto bottles quickly, or as slightly older babies. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what can happen with older babies. So some parents call me with the babies that won't take a bottle. I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. We get babies that have been breastfed for a time, and then we start offering them bottles and they don't want them. You kind of can't blame the baby in some respects if they're used to breastfeeding and then the bottle comes and like, I don't know what to do with this. We do know that round about 8 weeks old, the baby's reflex to suck on anything that goes in their mouth goes. So we might have a baby that's taken a bottle fine actually in the really early days and then gets to about 8 weeks and can't remember how to do it. And they just kind of go, no, they're taking the bottle in their mouth and they may be quite happily chewing on it, or they may be trying to push it out. So if we have this, we call it bottle refusal, but it makes it sound like the baby's kind of being willful. And generally they're not. Generally they're just like forgotten their bottle skills. They don't have the bottle skills yet. So in these cases, it can take some time to get the babies used to taking a bottle. The sorts of things we do to help. We really look carefully at the bottle and the teat that might fit your baby. So that exercise I mentioned at the beginning about trying them with just the teat and the ring, that can be a great thing. And in fact, getting them to practice on the teat and the ring can be wonderful. So we can dip this in some formula, offer it to the baby, get them to practice on this and see if they're comfy with the teat before we start offering them milk. When we get to bottle refusal territory, we try and make sure that the flow rate is actually on the faster side. So we're not trying to pace our babies. We're actually trying to get them feeding. So we might choose a bottle that flows slightly faster. And we can be a bit more novel with some of the positions that we're using with a bottle refusing baby, especially if they're slightly older. We can have that baby sometimes looking out. We can lean into telly and distractions if we need to. We can put them in a bouncer. We can actually, if necessary, I don't recommend this for newborns, but we can actually look at some quite funky positions, like even under a play gym or something, if we have to get the babies, older babies, taking a bottle and they can't or they don't want to. So there are different things you can do. And of course, you can always ring me. This is one of the things that I help with a lot. And there's quite a lot on my website about this as well. The other things we have is bottle aversion. And bottle aversion is where we've got babies with a really negative association with their bottles to the point where you start to hold them in bottle position and their baby starts screaming and flinging, pushing back. So they haven't even let it in their mouth, but they've got this sense that it's like, oh my gosh, no, this is a really stressful experience for me. And they're slightly harder to deal with. We've got to kind of de-stress this whole experience for them if we can. And that means not forcing, but really, really try not to force the baby to take a bottle. We can possibly avoid it. We can have a process of making friends with a bottle for a bottle of first baby. Initially, it's not an easy thing, and it often involves ringing someone who's got some experience of how to deal with averse babies. I don't know if this is applied to anyone. If your baby really, 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 really won't take a bottle, we do have some other options. We've got little cups, shot glass type cups. And this one's a slanted cup we can use, and the babies incredibly will often take milk from an open container if we have to. Once they're more than 3 months, we can use doilies, which is a slightly bigger version of this. For babies like 6 months plus, they're going to love these sorts of things. They love to grab them, and you can have a really messy tea party together. So where we've got the adults kind of having a cup of tea and the babies are watching you really intently, and then we've got, give them theirs. So a lot of babies that refuse bottles will take milk from things like this. Sippy cups, useful from about 4 months. Free flow sippy cups, you just get these in the supermarket. So this would pour out if your baby had it. And again, for babies that like a bit of control, the babies over 4 months where they want to hold it, they can feed a bit like this. As we get into sort of 7 or 8 months, if we have a baby that refuses a bottle, we can look at straws. Hard for a younger baby to get a straw. We're teaching the baby to use a straw. We might use something like these. These are very cheap on Amazon, and they're squeezy. So we get the babies used to using a straw by kind of dipping this into formula or yogurt or something like that. Put your finger on the end, so you've got a little bit in the end. Put it in the baby's mouth. Get them used to having a straw in. You're going to have to be able to do this. So we practice on the straw like that, and then ultimately we put the straw in the bottle and squeeze. We're squeezing bits into their mouth, and then hopefully after a time they've got it and they'll be using a straw. So we do have options for babies that are absolutely not having their bottle, but of course it's much easier if they will.
Really interesting though, Cathy. There's lots to consider, isn't there?
There is, and we make it sound very complicated, but just to reiterate that most babies take most bottles and most formula is absolutely fine. Just a bottle that's suitable for the age of the baby and a number one formula.
I ask a question, if that's all right. You said that you sort of experiment with the teat, find the right one for your baby. Can you get one bottle that comes with different teat? Or do you have to then literally buy the whole thing all over again?
Yeah, I mean, sort of. So some of the brands will offer different. They'll offer like a pack where we've got 9 bottles going all the way through to sippy cups and stuff. But no, generally they just don't want you to switch brand. And even the ones that do fit, where we've got a bottle of one brand and teat of another, they don't flow in quite the same way. So it's a bit annoying. What I would say is once you've chosen a teat, if your baby doesn't like it for some reason, choose a completely different one, right? So there's no point buying a very similar looking teat in a different brand. You'd be looking for a different teat entirely.
Is the one you're holding now the one that you were saying that most babies tend to latch on?
If I'm honest, and I don't want to be endorsing one brand over another, but generally a conical shape like this means that most sizes of baby, they get a good latch. And of course, I only see babies that are struggling with their bottles. I would often reach for one where we've got a nice shallow slope.
Earlier, you mentioned hospital bottles. What does mum need to go into hospital with to start bottle feeding straight away?
Really right. So if you know you're going to be formula feeding right from the get-go, the hospitals will ask you to take little sterile bottles with you. And it's not the same size as the supermarket ones. They kind of come in little 70ml versions, and they come with sterile teats that you can put with. Because many hospitals, they don't have the facilities to sterilize the bottles. So they ask you to take basically sterilized stuff with you, ready to use sterile stuff for you, any brand. Then you're just going to use them and then throw away anything that you don't.
And how much would you recommend you taking your bag with you and have ready to, for after delivery?
Yeah, I mean, if the babies are going to be feeding about 8 times in 24 hours, so we need at least 8, and possibly double that, because many people spend one night in hospital at least. It kind of depends on how long you think you'll be staying there. So after cesarean section, it's usually one night in. After vaginal birth, the quickest you'd ever get out is about 6 hours. Hospitals, of course, do have formula and sterile teats, but they don't just give them out. So if you're really stuck, of course, ask, and the midwives hopefully will bring you some from the cupboard, but it's not just lying on the side for you to take.
How many bottles generally do you recommend getting?
Perfect question. It kind of depends on how often you want to wash up. Really? At least a couple. And then you might think, well, how much space have I got in my particular kit? So a lot of sterilizers have got space for, say, 6 or 8. So you're never going to be really kind of washing more than 6 or 8 at a time.